Hi everyone, my name is Ella and welcome to the Brandeis University Admissions Podcast. Today I'm joined by Lauren. Would you like to give a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, my name is Lauren Williams. I'm a senior majoring in public policy and communications with a minor in journalism. I'm from Michigan and I've been involved in a few clubs at Brandeis. I think I feel like my longest standing club that I've been involved in is The Justice, which is our student newspaper. I started as a forum editor and now I'm a deputy editor.
Awesome. So today we're just going to be asking Lauren a little bit about her academic journey and also a little bit more about her experience with the journalism department. So can you tell me a little bit more about your IIM, also what IIM stands for, and a little bit about what inspired it?
Yeah, so IIM stands for Independent Interdisciplinary Major, and that provides student an opportunity to create their own major at Brandeis. And you kind of combine or partner with 3 different departments. So for myself, I decided that I wanted to integrate the legal studies department, the anthropology department, and the journalism department into my studies. I found that by year 2, I was still kind of at a standstill on what exactly I wanted to major in, and I had taken so many different classes in those departments, and it felt really exciting. I think in legal studies, talking a lot about the history of mass incarceration, and in anthropology, kind of talking about how different cultures kind of influence where we are today. And also the journalism department when it came to writing and producing podcasts. And that felt, again, just really interesting. And so by the time I got to my sophomore year, that's when I decided to create my own major. And yeah, it was a little bit of a longer process. You kind of have to write and pitch your own major and go in front of a committee at the end of it to really kind of tell the committee why you should have this major. But at the end of the day, it was a really great experience, and I'm really grateful to have created my own major at Brandeis.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you know about how many students are in the IIM program, or have you met a lot of students that also are involved?
You know, I don't exactly know the number of students that are involved, but I know that a lot of people, especially in the journalism department, have created their own IIM major. I think it's a really growing tiny sector of the majors that we have at Brandeis. I know they're working on kind of thinking on ways how they can expand the faculty that work in IIM and kind of that process. But yeah, I think I've ran into a lot of people who have IIMs.
That's awesome. So kind of pivoting really quickly to your interest in journalism, tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah, when I first got into Brandeis, I don't think I had any interest in journalism. I had been in a journalism class in high school, I believe like my freshman year, and that was fun, but it didn't necessarily feel interesting. I think I was leaning more into, I did a lot of mock trial in high school, and so I was really like, oh, I'm gonna do that when I get to college. But it was actually my first semester that I took a long form class. And that was with my professor, Neil Swidey. And I just really fell in love with it. I think it gave me an opportunity to go out into the city to do a lot of journalistic reporting. And then I also was interested, I discovered more of podcasting and what that looked like. And so I think it was really that class that kind of set me on that journey, and I actually ended up 2 months into the semester declaring my minor in journalism.
Oh, awesome. So that was pretty early on in your Brandeis career.
Yeah, it was definitely my freshman year, and that also was the month I got introduced to The Justice. So I think it all snowballed from those first couple of months at being at Brandeis, and everyone was just really welcoming, and I think it really provided me an opportunity to kind of expand the skills of writing and interviewing in a way that I didn't really expect.
Yeah. As a journalist, I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about how you personally have used journalism as an advocacy tool. And also if you could share a personal memory of, a story that you've reported on. I'm interested to kind of hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting when we talk about journalism and advocacy, because one big thing that we talk about in our journalism classes is that you're not an advocate, and that can feel really maybe between a rock and a hard place when you're writing about stories that feel so important or that impact a specific community. And I think it's about finding the balance, because you don't want to insert your own opinions, but you want to report in the facts. And so I think in terms of maybe being like a pseudo advocate in journalism, I think I've really learned, again, I think advocacy sometimes feels like about me, where I'm like, this is something that's really important to me. Like, I want to be able to march, or I want to be able to stand for this issue. And I think with journalism, it's about the other people. And I think that's something that I've really had to learn, where it's like, I'm not like racing towards the story, I'm not racing for it for myself, but I'm allowing the story to be told, and I am doing that reporting. And of course, like when you're doing reporting, sometimes it does have to do with you when you're choosing or you're picking out certain quotes. But I think for me, I've just learned that advocacy in a journalistic sense looks like other people telling their stories and you being able to relay that. And so I think my favorite story that I've been able to tell in terms of advocacy, or just being able to tell a story, I think goes back to the oral history project I did with Kaya Andora's show. Her story was so interesting and so poignant, I think. Her story kind of started when she was like a young person and figuring out her gender identity. And she actually ended up starting I believe like nonprofit in New York City that raises money. I think she raised over $1 million for affordable housing for trans women in New York City. And so being able to tell that story and also relay why it's important that people of marginalized identities have affordable housing, especially in New York City, was so cool. And also just being able to really allow her to tell her own personal journey of like growing up in New York as a trans woman in the 80s, and the type of work that she did, and how she's always had to kind of advocate for herself and stand up for herself in so many different spaces, as she now like kind of in the piece of sort of transitioning into more like a corporate space and kind of leading her nonprofit. So I think it really looks like that for me, being able to meet people and have them tell their stories.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love hearing that. I'm interested to know, I know journalism can kind of take you every which way and you kind of go with, whatever story you want to cover, but is there like maybe a specific topic or a specific type of story that you love to cover?
Yeah, oh my gosh, honestly I feel like I just stumble into it every time. Like I think at the beginning of my journalism career, when I first got here, I was really interested in mass incarceration, which I think is still such an important topic that I find myself drawn to. There's so many different journalism, nonprofit projects that kind of highlight that. I think my first audio story, I was kind of walking through the history of the war on drugs and how mass incarceration got to the place that it is today. I was able to interview a person who had just been released from prison, which was really such a special experience. And I think hearing his voice and his perspective just really provided clarity for me on the topic. And I was also able to interview Roz, who is the head of the Legal Studies Department, and also John Shattuck, who is, I believe he worked for the U.S. Secretary of State, and he was also a great perspective. And so, yeah, I think those things, I think that initially was something that I was really drawn to. And I think as I kind of moved throughout stories like local reporting, as local reporting has disappeared over the past years, I think it's felt so important to tell local stories as well. And being at the Justice, that was also a great opportunity because we work in the community. But yeah, doing stories I did a story about a dance complex in Cambridge and the importance of dance and the history of that community and that business. So I think I just fell into it, but I think I'm still learning what feels really interesting to me. And I feel like, again, to the curiosity, everything feels so interesting to me. I feel like there's a story everywhere I go. And so, yeah, I think I'm falling in and out of so many different topics every year.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you said that, like, in class you're told that you're not an advocate, but I feel like even everything that you were saying about the mass incarceration, like, you were giving a voice to the voiceless, which is very powerful and is, in and of itself, you're telling people's stories, which is so valuable. So I love that, and it's also a topic that I'm very passionate about, so it's cool kind of seeing from my own lens and then seeing from a journalism lens how those two things can kind of intersect with each other and how they're approached from different ways. So thank you for sharing. This can be within the Justice or within a class or just a passion project. But can you share a little bit about like the process of making a piece? So talk about like a piece that maybe is your favorite one that you've made, and what that really looked like from start to finish.
Yeah, so I think a lot of my audio projects, because that's kind of really what I specialize in, some of those projects started in class, and so you're kind of on a 3-month, semester schedule. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I need to find a person, send out the emails, set up a Zoom time, get everybody together. But I had a lovely, wonderful opportunity. I believe it was 2 summers ago to work on a passion project of mine. I was really interested in like New York Fashion Week, and so
Yes.
I was so interested in New York Fashion Week, kind of what that looks like, why is that important for so many people, and yeah, just like that world, because I feel like you see on like social media or TikTok of New York Fashion Week, but it feels so inaccessible, it feels so out of reach. So I think that summer I set out, I was like, I'm gonna go to New York Fashion Week and do a piece and interview people and designers.
You went?
I did.
Oh my God.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun. I took a train from Boston to New York City.
Wow.
I believe it was like on a break. I think maybe one of our fall breaks that we had. And yeah, I went to New York City by myself with like my recorder and like my camera.
Wow.
And yeah, so I ended up buying, there was like a few passes that you could buy to get into like fashion shows or talks with designers. And so I ended up going to a few fashion shows, I believe, in Manhattan. And I ended up sneaking into a lot of different shows. I snuck into like a designer showroom and actually got to interview a lot of designers. And the thesis for the piece was a lot about just the history of fashion was one of the things that I was really interested in. And also a lot of like Black designers, women of color designers, like how are you getting your footing and such? What could be like an exclusionary industry? And so I ended up interviewing a lot of different designers who are kind of getting their start or who are kind of already started their work, and hearing a lot about why they were drawn to fashion and what interests them. And I was able to go to a few like fashion shows and interview like models, like why is this important to you? Why do you show up every day for this job? And also this is kind of like the big event, so like, were you stressed out about this? Have you been like prepping for this? What does this look like for you? Just going up to random people on the street who are also in line for fashion shows and interviewing them was such a fun experience. And I ended up getting a summer grant from Brandeis to continue that research. So the first time I went in the fall was just like a self-funded project where I was like, I'm gonna go. And in the summer I was able to expand that research. I interviewed people from the White House who were part of fashion and fashion archiving. And so that was really fun. Interviewing people who kind of had the history of the beginning of fashion and the beginning of Black women in fashion, people who've designed like First Lady's dress and things like that, who I interviewed a woman who talked a lot about Abraham Lincoln's wife, and a lot of her designs were made by Black women, or a specific Black woman, I'm forgetting her name. But yeah, so just that process. And I was able to interview this woman who works at Hulu, and so her fashion, she worked on a piece. Again, these names are escaping me today. I wrote about it, I swear. I interviewed her and she did the costume designing for that. So she did a lot of callbacks to archiving and kind of calling back to a lot of different historical periods because it was a historical show. And then I think I interviewed a fellow Brandeis alum. Her name is Marco Jefferson, and she is a journalist. She works out of Columbia University, and she worked at Vogue, and she also, I believe her book won a Pulitzer, and so, or she's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, I believe. And so yeah, I was able to interview her and hear a little bit about the history of fashion for her. Yeah, overall it was such a fun,
Yeah, that sounds like such an incredible experience, and the fact like you were able to get a grant for it too. Do you remember what was that, the WOW Fellowship, or was it?
It was actually the Summer URCC Fellowship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like what the process was like in getting that grant, and like also any tips you might have for students that are applying for the same thing?
Yeah, I would say the first tip is definitely choose something that you're interested in, because you are you're locked in for the summer.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to choose a topic that you're interested in. You have to find an advisor. So I had a lovely advisor, Professor Anya Wallace, and I had a class with her, I believe, the semester prior. And so we knew of each other, and she was really awesome to work with. You can lean as much as you want on your faculty advisor or as little as you want. You meet a few times during the summer. Again, you can meet more if you have more questions. With her, it was a really nice, chill process. We met a few times over the summer. She gave me a bit of advice, and she gave me some books to read about fashion history, and that was really lovely. But the process itself is definitely, you have to find an advisor, and then I believe you have to write a proposal. And I believe it is about, I want to say 4 pages. So it's really like walking through the history of your topic, why you chose it, why it's important, why you want to pursue it, what questions you're trying to answer. I was able to find like templates online that I felt like I would be able to write from, and so I think that was really helpful.
Like outlines.
Yeah, so I didn't have to go into the dark. But yeah, so really kind of sitting with that, it's kind of like a research paper, and I think if you're at Brandeis, you've definitely done a research paper. But yeah, so it's like I kind of drew on books that I had read and really kind of the history of fashion, and again, like why it's important, what is the central issue, what are people not getting in fashion that they should get in fashion, what are designers getting that they're not getting, and so that's really what I encompassed in my proposal. But I would say it's a pretty straightforward process, just getting an advisor. You definitely want to get your advisor in advance, so they have to do a letter of recommendation. So you want to get your advisor in advance and write your proposal and be prepared in that way. But I would say outside of like the research that you do and kind of getting everything together, it's a very straightforward process.
Yeah, and would you say like your Professor Wallace, who I've heard of actually from my first year roommate, she's also a journalism major, so
nice.
She raves about the justice. Her name's Anika.
Oh my gosh!
Okay. I knew you might have known her.
Yeah.
She's gone abroad for a year, and I'm like crashing and burning.
No, she was a new staff. I love working with her.
I love her, and I miss her so much. So
we miss her too.
Oh, yeah. Awesome! Of course, everybody misses her. But she raves about Professor Wallace. But I'm interested to know, like, was she very accessible outside of class? Since like you only took one class with her, like what was that process like in getting a recommendation in the first place?
Yeah, I would say she was a very open professor, which was so nice. I ran her down a few times to talk with her, but every time I met with her, she was so enthused to do it. And I believe it was actually I was taking a class with her at that time, so I was actually able to. Bother her in class.
Yeah.
Like, have you read my email? But after we started, she was so easy to work with. And we were able to set up office hours, which I think is really important if you're looking for an advisor. But yeah, I think it's really nice to choose a professor you've at least had one class with, or even choosing a professor if you find like their research aligns with research you want to do. I think it can be a little bit like hard to find if you're like a first year, or if you haven't made that many connections with professors. Maybe it's a bit hard to find someone or a professor that connects with you, but I think researching somebody who's done research and something that you're interested in can be really helpful. And I think professors are always willing to help. And if they can't be your advisor, they can direct you to a professor who could be your advisor.
They can be that guide. I've definitely had the same experience, so it's cool that like there's that cohesion. And I'm just interested to know, like, is this work published? Like, can we find it anywhere? Is it like somewhere at Brandeis? I'm like so interested in like learning about what you learned.
It's in the process of being published. I think when I finished my summer research, I was just like, summer's over. And kind of moved into the semester. But it's this semester, at least at the end before I graduate, a lot of my work should be published either to my own personal like Spotify playlist or working with the journalism department, saying how we can like publish this podcast.
That's awesome. And again, I know sometimes don't remember everything, but like, do you remember a specific fashion piece or a specific interview that really stuck with you, or what was some of your favorite aspects of that experience?
I'm again forgetting her specific name, and I definitely should go back. But she was talking a lot about this designer that I interviewed at New York Fashion Week. Was talking about a lot of how her designs were influenced by her mom, and kind of, I think that really informed the work that I did going forward. Was just how is fashion like a cultural, I think a cultural stepstone and touchstone for so many young women. Like you're watching your mother get ready, you're going to the mall with your friends. Like a lot of that felt very social to me, and I think that really influenced the way that I kind of went about interviews as I went along with my day. And I started asking people, about their mom. So I would go on the street and, you know, I kind of ask people what their relationship is, the personal relationship with fashion, because I think a lot of it feels like consumerism. And so I was able to ask this other woman that was so lovely on the street, she was going on her way to a show, and she was telling me about like, I believe like her mom like kept journals of the things that she wore, and so when she was an adult, she kind of went back and like read her journals, and yeah, I think that was just there's so much more that happened that I'll have to come back to, but when that experience, I think a lot that stuck out to me was the influence moms have on our fashion, and or just the women in our life have on the way that we see ourselves and the way that we dress and the way that we carry ourselves through the world.
I love that. That's beautiful. Okay, I have another question actually. It pivots a little bit, but I mean, the fact that like you were able just to kind of like pick up on a train and go to New York Fashion Week by yourself is like crazy to me, because I would have been so scared like sitting in the middle of the street, like who do I ask? Even, you know, with my social media projects that I do here at Brandeis, like I'm looking for students to interview and I get so nervous. So I guess like for people that maybe have like that block or maybe are a little bit more introverted, like do you have any tips on like how to start your first interview, or again just like aspiring journalists, like what do you have to say to them?
Yeah, you know, it's so funny, I'm an introverted person, like on a day-to-day basis I feel a little bit more introverted, but I think the beautiful thing with journalism is like you kind of assume it as a job. So if you just like get out of your head about it, like this, I kind of like to say this has nothing to do with me, like this is for the project, or this is for the piece, and then going out and interviewing people. But I'll say like I think there's sometimes that anxiety or fear, especially when I first started. It's like no one is going to want to talk to me, or people are going to think it's like weird that I'm coming up to them with like a mic. But so many people want to talk. Like I think like
they want to, that's how it is.
Yes, it's like everyone wants to talk about themselves. Like everybody wants to talk about what's going on in their lives, and people are so grateful that you ask. So I think like getting started, like don't be afraid to ask. So many people want to talk about themselves or talk about what's going on. So many people want to be heard, and so I think like getting out of your head about it. And also it's okay to make mistakes during interviewing. I think sometimes we want to be perfect, or we want the perfect question and we want it to go a certain way. But if you just see it through again with curiosity, I think you'll be in such a better place at the end of your interview. If you go into it with an open mind, I think sometimes there's like a little bit of like rigidity with it, where you're like, like I really want this to go well, even if it goes poorly, or even if there's like mistakes or people say something you're not expecting, that's all a part of the process. I think you can definitely spin that into a different story, and then you're following something new. So
totally.
I think it's a little bit nerve-wracking to start, but once you get into the flow, it's so fun.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where like someone's answered a question and you're like, oh, like I don't know where to take this, or like why would you say that? Like how do you kind of like rebound from that?
100%. I've had so many interviews where I'm like, where are we going?
Right.
I'm like, oh no. I think I always try to remember the central question I'm trying to ask myself in these interviews to take us back. There's definitely been times, like at least 30 minutes of an interview where I'm like, I don't want to cut you off, but this is, I don't like,
we're on a time limit.
We're on a time limit. This has nothing to do with what so I think I try to stick to that central question. I think also in journalism classes, I had this happen in the oral history class that I took, where where our professor, you're at a table, she's on the other side of you, and she's gonna be the most like, her job is to be the most difficult interviewee, and you're doing it in front of class, and so that can be nerve-wracking, but I think it was such a telling experience, and it teaches you a lot about pivoting. It was every question I asked is a different answer, a difficult answer. And I think that really taught me like, okay, let's again like stick to the central question, let's pivot, and even if it isn't exactly what I'm looking for, maybe again like it's something new. So like there's been times in interviews where I was like, oh, she's probably, or this person's probably going to say this, or, you know, I know where we're going next. I have my, you know, this is number 12 out of like the 50 questions I have, like we're kind of going through the list. But again, I think it takes you somewhere new. If you hear something interesting, expound on that and like keep going.
Totally. I love that like you were able to simulate that in one of your classes too. Like you were not only being prepared on like what a proper interview guide is, but also like preparing yourself for like adverse situations. It reminds me a lot of one of my legal studies classes I had, where our professor like split us up into 2 different mock trial courts and was like, okay, argue for the side that you disagree with. And it's like, you're putting me in this impossible situation, and then I'm sitting here like trying to convince myself of a side that I don't even agree with. And same thing with you, like you're trying to pivot your interview when you're just like, I'm here with this interview guide, I don't know what you want from me. So I think that's like a really cool commonality with the Brandeis professors. Like they really do try to simulate those real life experiences, which then like prepare us for real life. And I mean, everything you've just said, like I'm sure that experience of interviewing people is never going to be fully linear. And so yeah, that's cool that you're able to learn that in the classroom and then kind of address it outside as well. So going off of that really quickly, also, I just want to know a little bit from your coursework, like what are some skills that you think you're going to be able to kind of carry into the real world?
Yeah, so I think, again, with being like an IAM major, like there's so many different classes that I'm able to take because of that, so I can leave the journalism department and go into different courses. And so I think in a lot of my studies, whether it be the anthropology department, whether it be with legal studies, I think a lot of the commonalities with these courses is the ability to expound on a point. And so I think like most of my classes at Brandeis have been so discussion based. I feel like I've rarely ever been in a class with over 20 people. I think like it's been such a, and that's been such a gift, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to come to Brandeis, because of that teacher to student ratio. And so I think in that is like being able to listen to other people, hear something that I find interesting, and also kind of relate that to maybe a different topic or what we're talking about in class. And so I think, again, it's taught me to be curious, but I think it's also taught me to truly like listen to what somebody is saying and kind of take my time when arriving to a point. And then I think also to allow myself to be changed. I think in a lot of different courses and classes, maybe I'll come in with an opinion from the reading. And somebody will say something completely different or something completely new, and it'll allow me to think about something that I've never even considered. Or they'll come in with a perspective that is so different from my own lived experience, but it'll really make me think about, you know, somebody else's life or how this is impacting somebody else, or, you know, what someone else is taking from it. And so I think like in the real world, that's really a lot what we do. You know, it's listening to people, and everyone is coming with different lived experiences out of college, you know, in adult life, in work, and being able to again hold space for that and listen to different opinions and different perspectives, and not kind of bulldoze my way to the finish line, or really just be set fast in exactly what I want or what I'm listening to. So I think it's taught me, a lot of my courses has taught me like to have patience, and to be like a good listener. And I think a lot of also different courses I've been able to take, like also in like the theater department, which has been really fun, is to collaborate with other people. And so like ideas, I don't have to have ideas that are just my own. I can come in and listen to other people, and I think, you know, a lot of good work is made with a team and with other people. And so even though I think my idea is great, so many other ideas are fantastic too. And so being able to put that together and make something that is unique and something that encompasses so many other people.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's like such a unique part of the Brandeis experience too, because of like how interdisciplinary the core curriculum is, and through those cross listings, like even within those higher level classes, and in my experience that would be politics for you. You might have a very different experience also being an IAM, you get into like all of those classes. But I just feel like, you know, I don't just have all higher level politics classes or students in my classes. I have students who are taking the class for their writing requirement and their economics, and then we have neuroscience students and theater students, and again, we might be all reading the same article, but we're coming at it through different lenses, which just makes for such a fulfilling academic experience. And I'm sitting here like, wow, how did I not know that? And this person has never taken a politics class a day in their life. Kind of going off of that, since, you know, you are an IM, what is that like, kind of delving into all of these different departments, since there's not like a central department for your major? I'm interested to know like kind of how that shapes your academic experience.
Yeah, I think it's so fun. I think every semester is something new. And also I think it pushes me to different materials. So I think in anthropology department, it was a lot of reading, different types of articles and different types of papers. I think it was a completely different style than journalism, which of course is like
Yeah.
less, I wouldn't say less academic, but a lot of it is more like reporting based.
Mm-hmm.
But with the anthropology department, a lot of that was more like academic text or a lot of research based, which kind of allowed me to see like a different way of thinking and a different way that people interview people. Like anthropological interviewing is different from journalistic
Yeah,
interviewing.
totally.
And you have like kind of a different cause that you're getting at. So I think it really allowed me to expand my idea of what interviewing is, what it is to connect with people, what you're looking for. And in the legal studies department, again, that's a completely different way of writing and thinking. And so it also taught me, it also made me consider like the legal side of journalism, you know, because a lot of what we talk about in journalism is policies, but it's like less of kind of, you know, point A and point B of a policy and more of how this is impacting people, or more of like breaking news about a policy and allowing like experts and officials to kind of gather and come back. But with legal studies, it allowed me to think like, what are the long-term ramifications of this policy, or who is it impacting,
Yeah.
or what's actually like the lay of the land. And it taught me a lot about the history of the country that we live in and the policies that have kind of been enacted, and, you know, like Citizens United, and that happened like years ago, but now we're seeing it today.
Yeah.
And I think that's also informed my journalistic perspective in writing, because I'm able to recall on certain cases or certain policy or things like that that are now, I'm like, this is why maybe we have like not affordable housing, and so this is why it's impacting these people. So yeah, it's been really all encompassing, where I feel like I've learned so much, and it's really helped me as I kind of leave Brandeis and start a career. Yeah.
That's awesome. Have you ever taken a Breen class?
I haven't,
Oh,
but oh my gosh, I like
I
literally,
love
I'm
him.
such an admirer of that man. He was my academic advisor
Oh.
my first semester. He was so sweet.
Professor Daniel Breen is a campus celebrity.
Truly.
I see him at the gym all the time. It's great.
I love his Converse.
Yeah, I've taken like 3 different legal studies classes with him. He's very famous for his art breaks. During Intro to Law, he'll throw his hat up in the air and say art break, and then he shows us different types of historical art that kind of like connects back to the case that we're reading that day. Just because I'm a legal studies student and, you know, I'm interested in knowing about what classes you've taken, tell me about, you know, one of your favorite classes in the legal studies department you've taken.
Yes, okay. I am blanking on the name, but it was a legal studies class. It was talked about like the history of policy in the United States, so I think that was really good base level introduction in the legal studies department for me, because that was the first class I believe I took. And it was so interesting. I think it provided a lot of creative freedom, which I wasn't expecting. I was kind of expecting to have a lot of dense reading. So I was kind of gearing up for that, but it was so much fun. I actually we were able to do like a project at the end of the semester. And I was able to do this project that was about public policy and kind of leaning into a little bit about law, and I also got to integrate some journalism
That's awesome.
into it. I did a audio story about East Palestine, Ohio. They had a train derailment that kind of led to, it was a very big like environmental environmental disaster. Yeah, and so it impacted like their air quality for a while of time, and it really disrupted the town. And I actually ended up driving to East Palestine, Ohio to do the audio story. Because again, I'm from Michigan, so it was on our break, and me and my dad did like a road trip to Ohio. And I interviewed people in the town, and that was such a transformative experience. I think a lot of people being able to again go up to like random strangers and ask them about a really terrifying experience in their life. I think that was something new for me. And being able to hold, again, like space for people to have these emotions and like crying in front of me while I'm interviewing them, and to really garner a really deep perspective about, you can hear something on the news, but also talking to people. And it was, you know, it was definitely like going into churches and talking to people who were setting up like water stations and who were doing community organizing, or even just like the librarian in the town. It's a very small town, and that was really fun, and also something that really taught me to take my time with interviewing. So yeah, it was such a fun experience, and I think that it was a great introduction into like policy in the United States and law in the United States, but also it gave me a fun opportunity to go out.
Totally. And that's awesome that like you were able to have, you know, the freedom in that, because I mean, as a legal studies student, you know, our essays are like 3 pages and like you have to fit it all in there or like good luck.
Yeah.
So like that freedom must have been so cool.
Yeah.
I know I definitely struggle with that because I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And so that transition from like, you know, being very clear and concise was definitely a challenge for me.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that like also I'm interested in knowing, you mentioned a little bit about like the emotions that you were met with. Personally, like as you're interviewing people and seeing them get emotional in front of you, you know, how do you kind of not mitigate your own emotions, but like how do you kind of connect with them? How do you still kind of, I guess, like stay on track when people are like sharing such vulnerable parts of themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a hard part of the journalism job. I think because you want to obviously like console the other person who's in front of you, and it's like you can't stop the interview because like you have to kind of finish the story, but you want to respect the other person. And so I think it's been like a balance. I think checking in during the interview, like, are you okay to keep going? And also giving people, if they need like a 5, if they need a 10, even if they need a 20, to come back. I do think like emotions are a really great, I don't think they have to be something to stray away from in an interview. I think they're a great indicator of where somebody is at about a specific issue. And so I think that can be very authentic to the interviewing process. I think for myself, to remain empathetic and also neutral has been something that I've found to be very helpful in an interviewing process. Because I think if I go too hard into their emotions, then we stay there for a little bit, maybe too long, and maybe we don't get back on track. But I think when I stay, again, like neutral and empathetic and being able to allow them to speak and work through the emotions that they're working through, whether that be anger, whether that be sadness, and then again, get back to the central question of, you know, how is this impacting you, or how has this changed your life, or things like that, because I think it empowers the other person to keep going and telling their story. And again, just like respecting them through the process, because we're all people, and at the end of the day, like this job is really about other people and telling their stories. So yeah, again, just really being open and also not allowing my emotions to overtake the interview.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like it's such like, people would think that's such a simple thing, but then when you're there in the moment, you just mentioned, and I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how I would handle like carrying that forward, like, or whether or not it would be appropriate to stop. And so yeah, I mean, the fact that like you're able to kind of like read the room and also understand like maybe this person needs a break, I feel like that's a skill in its own as well, like understanding when people might be at their breaking point, when people need breaks, just so that like again you can still get your job done while telling their story. So thank you for sharing. You talked about how you were able to like travel into the city. What was that like? Was the entire class going? Was that like for an assignment? Did you just do it just cause? You know, I want to know more about that.
Yeah, so it was actually for our first assignment, I believe. It was called a profile assignment. I initially had a completely different direction on who I was going to cover and what I was going to do, and my interview ended up falling through like the day or 2 days before the assignment was due, and I was so stressed out. But I ended up finding this woman, and I'm sorry if I pronounce her name a little bit incorrectly, but her name is Ruthsy, and I want to say Lauren Jean. She ran for Boston City Council at large back in 2021. And I ended up finding her flyer for like a meet and greet event. And so I just ended up calling an Uber and going to Dorchester and going to her meet and greet. And it was such a beautiful experience to kind of just see how she interacted with her constituents, and the ways that she was able to get people out to vote, the connection that she had with her city. And I ended up profiling her, so I was able to interview her at the meet and greet. And it was more of like a self-directed, let me actually like go out into the city and see what's going on. And then she ended up winning. I think she had the largest amount of votes. And I believe now she is sitting at a more leadership position at Boston City Council.
That's awesome. Also like that ability to have that freedom within the class, kind of to just like, you know, interview whoever you wanted. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do you remember like any of the other interviews that happened in that class, or what other students were getting involved in?
One of my friends did a story about Bigfoot, and so she was interviewing people who were part of like Bigfoot conspiracy groups. I think she actually went out because she's from California, and so I think she actually went out and interviewed people that were a part of that. But I don't remember specific stories. I just remember that there was a lot of freedom within the class. Our professor had a saying that was like, you just have to go out and get those interviews and don't leave and go on location. And I think that was something that really stuck with me throughout that class. Yeah.
And would you say like the skills that you learned in that class have like kind of integrated themselves in your position at the Justice, or how do you see like your academic life and then like your club life kind of finding, I guess, like comparison points or intersections?
Yeah, I think in long form, I think something that was really stressed was journalistic curiosity. And one of the main things that come with writing in that class is it's called show, don't tell. And I think that's something that can be really hard in journalism. Like, you want to tell everything. If they're a good person, you want to say that they're a good person. But one thing that was imparted on me in that class was you need to give examples. Like, if they're a good person, do they help an elderly person walk across the street or something? And so as an editor, when I was reading stories, because I worked in our forum section, so it's a lot of op-eds. So you have an opinion, you just want to say your opinion, of course. But I think from that class into being at the Justice, it was really telling people like, okay, give me an example, or why is this important to you, or why should other people care about it? And I think that was definitely a learning process, because again, I started my freshman year and I hadn't really worked in journalism. So I think throughout the course of that class and also other journalism classes, I think it made me a better editor, and I think it made me refine the questions that I had for staff writers.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I heard you've been involved in research as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny because I got involved in research also my first semester as a freshman in the journalism department. So I think maybe that's kind of where this journey really starts, is that first 2 months I got here. My first research position at Brandeis was for a documentary class that I'm actually taking this semester.
Oh.
Yeah, it was to curate documentaries in a syllabus for journalism students that kind of encompasses a lot of different perspectives and different stories that I feel like students would be able to study. And in that particular research position, I found it to be really interesting because we were watching documentaries. And I was also with a cohort of students who were coming together and to talk about films and really kind of see that journalism is so expansive. Like, it doesn't just have to be print, or it doesn't just have to be audio. It really bleeds into so many different facets. And that was really fun. And yeah, I think research has evolved for me. I've done a few other research positions at Brandeis. I did another kind of course syllabus research position, and that was for a class that was really centered around female journalists, and specifically like women of color, trans women, and all of different women who have come before us in journalism. And that was really fun. Just kind of seeing their own personal journey and really relaying that to students, that no matter who you are, where you start, you can impact change in the journalism world. And so that was really cool. And then I think my last research position was actually, I did an oral history story, and it was a partnership with the Women's Gender Studies department, and that was so much fun. It was interviewing women who were above 50, and it was in tandem with a book called The Second Life. Forgetting the author, but she's wonderful. And her book was a collection of stories of women who were past 50 and who were still appreciating life, because I think there's like a rhetoric that, you know, for women, once you're out of your 20s, you're kind of out to pasture. And her book was really to kind of rebel against that narrative. And so I ended up interviewing so many fantastic women who were over 50 and kind of hearing their life story, hearing why being over 50 is awesome, and also all the lessons that they've learned along the way and the confidence that they've grown into in themselves. And so I was able to do that audio project and edit that. And that was really lovely.
That's awesome. I actually love that you did oral history research, because I am actually doing some for a class right now. So I actually have some questions for you in terms of tips and tricks. And I love that you mentioned women and gender studies, because that's actually one of my majors, so nice. Kind of that commonality. But so I'm taking a class called sociology. It's in the sociology department. It's families, kinship, and sexuality, and we're doing oral history projects, and I'm doing one about single motherhood. I've never written an interview guide or anything like that. So what like tips do you have from a journalism perspective for me?
Okay, cool. Oh my gosh. So the main advice advice I can give for oral history is, I think, again, like being curious.
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of you have a hypothesis or you have a thesis that you're kind of following,
Mm-hmm.
certain things that you want to know about a person, but I like breaking it up in early life, middle life, kind of like a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I like breaking it up in those sections. I like doing a little bit of research about the person. With the first oral history project I did, there was like less, I kind of got like a little bio, but there was kind of less like articles or videos that I could find, whereas my second oral history project, there was a lot more about her. But I definitely recommend doing it in parts. And then I think also kind of what you would like to know about that experience. I think,
Yeah.
again, to curiosity, but if there's something about single mothers or that journey, or, you know, whether it is like financial, like how do you, you know, support yourself, or the emotional work that it goes to being a mother and also being a single mother. I think all of those things and maybe breaking it up in parts could be really helpful.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Definitely gonna bring that into my assignment. Okay, so before we start, or before we end, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
So when you're ready, favorite professor?
You know what? I'm gonna have to go with Neil Swidey. I've taken so many classes with him. He's so lovely. He is the head of our journalism department.
Beautiful. Okay, Dunkin', Starbucks, or Einstein's?
I feel like Einstein has been with me since my hardest days working in the
Facts.
office. So
I got
yeah.
my breakfast from there this morning. Owl or Judge?
Owl is so much cuter.
Okay, there we go. Favorite class?
Political Packaging of America with Eileen McNamara. Great class.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to learn more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite Brandeis tradition?
Oh my gosh. I would say staying up into the library until 3 o'clock in the morning feels like a staple Brandeis tradition.
Perfect. Midnight library.
Mm-hmm.
One word to describe a Brandesian.
I like the word you used earlier, curious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite spot on campus?
This is gonna be so random. I have such a specific favorite spot. It's the 3rd floor of the Mandel, like.
Me too.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Like right by the, oh my god, the rooftop garden.
Yes.
I love studying near there.
I love that
it's
spot.
so pretty.
Yes.
Okay, shout out to the rooftop garden. Must-see place in Waltham.
Ooh, oh my gosh. I feel like it's so basic, but I like Moody Street. I think that's like a nice place to go, like on the weekend or like in between your week if you want to get like a nice coffee or if you just want to walk around. And they have a trail that you can walk.
They do?
Yeah,
Oh my
it's like
God.
right. It's, if you know where like the Margarita's Mexican
Yes,
restaurant.
yes.
It's right to the, I believe, the right of that, and it's a
Oh my
nice trail you
god.
can
And
walk.
it's like by the wash factory area?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I run it in the summer, so
That's
it's like
awesome.
so nice.
Okay. Favorite place to eat in Waltham? Because the food is very popular.
Oh my god. Oh my god. You know what? I would go to this place all the time, especially like from first year to now. It's Vinoda. It's
Oh my
an
god,
Italian
yes.
restaurant. It's so good.
It's so good.
Everyone's so nice too.
My friends and I always argue that like some of them think Sweet Basil is better, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but like oh my god, I'm such a
Vinoda's
stan.
so good. I
love
used to
that.
call in all the time and like they know my order by heart. So yeah.
Yeah, my other favorite is Treetop. They have like
It's really
the
good.
best pad see ew ever. Okay, last one. One piece of advice for first years.
Oh my gosh. I would say stick through it. I think the
Yeah.
first year can be a little bit overwhelming or difficult and you're trying to find your footing. But I think if I could have told myself it's that everything is going to pan out, even if it seems like there's no like research positions on campus, there's no jobs on campus, you don't know what department you want to do, you don't know what you want to study. I think as long as you, again, stay curious and stick through it, it's so going to work out. You're going to find clubs that you love, you're going to find people that you love, and there's going to be challenging moments, but I think it's going to be so rewarding, especially now that you get to the end of it. It would have all been really fun.
Yeah, love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah,
It
thank
was
you so much for having me.
so
This
great
was
to learn
so
more
fun.
about you. We're gonna have to talk about Annika in a minute.
Yes.
More about documentaries. And thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.